Walter had always been methodical. A retired aerospace engineer, he approached his health the same way he once approached cockpit designs, with precision, logic, and no room for unnecessary variables. So when his wife passed and the routines of daily life gave way to solitude, he took a fresh look at his diet. He trimmed the fat. Literally. No more butter on his toast. No more late-night handfuls of nuts. Dairy? Out. He'd read somewhere it caused inflammation. He cut back on fruits too, citing sugar, and swapped his lunch meat sandwiches for a salad with oil-free dressing. By 61, Walter's fridge was a minimalist dream. Plain greens, dried chicken, black coffee. Clean eating, he called it. Efficient. At first, nothing seemed off. In fact, he felt a strange pride at his discipline. But a few weeks in, little things started happening. He would forget where he placed his keys, a room-to-room hunt that ended with them already in his jacket. His hands, once steady from years of drafting flight models, started trembling when gripping a coffee mug. And then came the flutter, not quite pain, but a strange skip in his heartbeat. A hesitation. His doctor found nothing abnormal. Blood pressure, fine. Cholesterol a little low. No real red flags. Maybe stress, they said. Try to relax. Walter nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was pulling loose, thread by thread, inside him. He didn't know it yet, but his body was quietly starving for something it used to rely on. Not calories, he was eating enough. But nutrients. The kind that come from foods often labeled indulgent, unnecessary, or too rich for aging bodies. Fats that keep the brain supple. Minerals that regulate the heart's rhythm. Fibers that feed the ecosystem within. Proteins that rebuild what time naturally breaks down. Walter had removed them, thinking he was making smarter choices. But at his age, the margin for error narrows. What might be a harmless omission in youth becomes a slow, compounding deficit after 60. And the worst part? There were no sirens. No dramatic collapse. Just the gentle unraveling of systems that once ran without his awareness. The truth is, the danger isn't always in what we eat, but in what we stop eating. Foods that once formed the foundation of strength, clarity, and vitality can become casualties of health trends and fear-driven advice. Walter had unknowingly waged war against his own resilience. By the time the fatigue settled in, it wasn't just about food anymore. It was about what had been silenced. His energy. His focus. His confidence in his own body. And he wasn't alone. Across the country, millions of older adults make similar cuts, removing entire food groups in the name of longevity, without realizing the quiet toll it takes. Not overnight, but slowly. Subtly. Just like Walter's fading grip on the world he once understood so clearly. Number 1. The forgotten defender, healthy fats. Carolyn was 65 when she stood in front of the pantry with a trembling hand, holding a bottle of olive oil like it was something dangerous. Her husband, Doug, had passed from a heart attack the year before, and she'd made a vow, no more risky foods. No butter, no eggs, no oils. Heart healthy now meant dry toast, steamed vegetables, and fear. She thought she was saving herself. But by winter, she could hardly remember the names of her neighbors. It started subtly. A word here or there slipping from her mind. The wrong name for a familiar face. She'd reread the same page of a book 3 times and still not remember what it said. Then came the fog, a heavy, invisible film over her thoughts. Her doctor suggested puzzles and more hydration. But no one asked what she had stopped eating. There's a quiet myth still lurking in many American kitchens, that fats, especially saturated ones, are the enemy. For decades, the low-fat craze painted them as villains in every story about aging. But the truth is far more nuanced. After 60, the right fats are not only safe, they are essential. The brain is nearly 60% fat. Every nerve signal, every memory, every flicker of thought relies on a rich blend of fatty acids to function. Without them, cognition dulls. Nerves falter. Even emotions grow flatter. And the heart? Ironically, it too depends on fat, not just for energy, but for insulation and repair. Omega-3 fatty acids, found in fatty fish, flaxseed, and grass-fed dairy, reduce inflammation, protect arterial walls, and stabilize heart rhythm. Even cholesterol, long feared, is a raw material for hormones like estrogen and testosterone, which decline naturally with age. Yet millions of seniors, like Carolyn, trim these defenders from their diet and unknowingly open the door to issues they were trying to prevent. Low-fat diets may lead to hormonal imbalances, brittle skin, poor vision, and memory loss. The brain becomes starved for its most vital fuel. Back in Carolyn's kitchen, something shifted the day she spoke to a nutritionist, a soft-spoken woman who gently asked, "When was the last time you had a whole egg?" Carolyn paused, unable to recall. Together, they built a simple plan: avocado with breakfast, salmon twice a week, real olive oil drizzled over roasted vegetables, grass-fed butter, just a bit, on whole grain toast. Within weeks, the fog began to lift. She started remembering names. Her energy rose. And one evening, she caught herself humming in the kitchen again, a tune she hadn't realized she'd forgotten. It wasn't a miracle. It was biology, reawakened. Fats aren't indulgences after 60. They're scaffolding, the building blocks of a resilient mind, a strong heart, and steady nerves. Without them, the body begins to quietly decay from within. And in homes like Carolyn's, where silence once sat heavily, life starts to hum again. One spoonful of oil, one square of butter, one memory at a time. Number 2. The silent power of magnesium-rich foods. Frank never liked to make a fuss. At 68, he still moved like a man 10 years younger. Or at least, that's what he told himself. He stayed active, walked every morning, avoided junk food. But for months now, something had been gnawing at the edges of his nights, a strange restlessness in his legs, a flutter in his chest just as he was drifting off to sleep. The kind of symptoms too vague to explain but too persistent to ignore. When the heart palpitations first began, he blamed stress. Then caffeine. Then aging. What he didn't blame, what he never even considered, was a missing mineral. Like many people his age, Frank had simplified his meals. Smaller portions. Fewer snacks. No more handfuls of almonds after dinner, no more dark leafy greens. They upset his stomach. And pumpkin seeds? Those disappeared with his grandkids. But what vanished with those foods wasn't just crunch or taste, it was magnesium. Magnesium isn't flashy. It doesn't get the press that calcium or vitamin D do. But it is, quietly, one of the most essential minerals for people over 60. And when it's missing, the body begins to stutter in ways that are hard to trace. A twitching eyelid, a stiff back, random anxiety without a clear trigger, or a heart that seems to skip when it should be steady. Magnesium supports over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body. It calms the nervous system, regulates blood sugar, relaxes muscles, and helps the heart maintain a proper rhythm. But as people age, magnesium stores naturally decline, especially if they take medications like diuretics or proton pump inhibitors. Add to that the fact that many magnesium-rich foods get cut out of clean, senior diets, and you've got a perfect storm. Frank's story isn't unique. Millions of older adults go to sleep with tight calves and wake up groggy, not realizing the two might be connected. A study from the National Institutes of Health found that nearly half of adults over 50 don't get enough magnesium through food. And unlike deficiencies that shout, magnesium whispers, until something vital starts to give out. After yet another sleepless night, Frank finally sat with a dietitian at the urging of his daughter. The specialist didn't start with medications or tests. She started with a grocery list. She pointed out foods Frank used to eat but had quietly eliminated: spinach, almonds, black beans, cashews, avocados, and pumpkin seeds. He began small. A handful of roasted seeds in the evening. A sautéed bed of kale under his eggs. By the second week, he noticed fewer cramps. By the third, the palpitations had faded. It wasn't dramatic, just the slow return of a body finally receiving what it had been silently asking for. Magnesium-rich foods aren't optional after 60. They are the body's internal electricians, wiring every spark of energy, thought, and movement. Without them, the signals grow dim, the muscles tighten, and the heart forgets its rhythm. And for people like Frank, The difference between restlessness and peace can come down to a few forgotten seeds in the palm of a hand. Number 3. The misjudged fruit, berries and fiber. Nancy didn't think much of it at first. A little bloating here, a little sluggishness there. Nothing dramatic. But by the time she turned 72, she noticed she was getting sick more often, little colds that lingered, cuts that took longer to heal, and a fatigue that settled deep in her bones by late afternoon. Her doctor checked the usual suspects. Thyroid fine. Iron, borderline. But nothing explained why she felt like her engine had lost its hum. She blamed aging, of course. Everyone around her did. Just the way it goes, they'd say at her church group when someone mentioned low energy or digestive trouble. But then one day, while organizing old family photos, Nancy stumbled on a picture of herself 20 years ago, laughing, surrounded by grandkids, holding a bowl of berries so full they spilled over the rim. She smiled at the memory, then froze. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a piece of fruit. Like many people her age, Nancy had fallen into the trap of sugar fear. Somewhere along the way, she'd lumped all sweetness together, cutting out cookies and candy, but also apples, pears, and especially berries. Too much sugar, she'd been told. So she removed them from her plate and never questioned what else disappeared with them. What vanished was fiber. Real, plant-based, gut-nourishing fiber. After 60, the gut becomes more vulnerable, not just to discomfort, but to dysfunction. The diverse bacteria that support digestion, immunity, and even mood begin to decline. And their favorite food? Soluble fiber, found in fruits like apples, pears, and especially berries. These fibers act as prebiotics, feeding the beneficial microbes that protect against inflammation, infection, and disease. Berries, in particular, offer something rare, polyphenol. These compounds have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and reduce oxidative stress, helping to slow cognitive decline. They also reduce inflammation throughout the body, from joints to arteries. Nancy didn't need a science lecture. What she needed was to feel like herself again. At her next grocery run, she hesitated in the produce aisle. The raspberries looked ripe. The blueberries glowed. She picked up a small container, half expecting someone to tell her it was a bad idea. No one did. That night, she added a handful to her oatmeal. The next morning, something strange happened. Her digestion was smooth. A few days later, she noticed she wasn't dragging through the afternoon. A week after that, her skin looked just a little more alive. It wasn't magic. It was microbiology. Her gut was healing. Cutting fruit may seem like a small choice. But over time, the absence of fiber and antioxidants can quietly unravel systems meant to protect and energize us. Without fruit, the gut starves. The immune system dulls. The body forgets how to defend itself. And for people like Nancy, the return of something as simple as berries can be the first sign that the body still remembers how to thrive, if only it's fed the right things. Number 4. The vanishing protein. Harold looked fine. To the casual eye, he was even enviable for a 70-year-old. Lean, tidy, upright posture, always dressed in a tucked-in shirt. He'd never been overweight, never had a big appetite. Most days, he sipped coffee until noon, then grazed, a bit of soup here, some crackers or fruit there. Maybe half a chicken breast at dinner. Light eating. Sensible. But one afternoon, a misstep on the back porch changed everything. The step wasn't even that high, barely a foot. But when Harold landed wrong and fell, he couldn't push himself up. His arms trembled. His thighs offered nothing. His muscles, once assumed to be there, simply weren't. At the hospital, the scans showed no broken bones. But something else alarmed the staff. He had severe muscle wasting. Not from illness. Not from immobility. From slow, steady undernourishment. Harold had unknowingly starved his body of protein for years. It's a common story. After 60, many people eat less, smaller meals, lighter fare, fewer cravings. But appetites shrink faster than needs do. The body still requires the raw materials to repair cells, support immunity, and maintain strength. And protein, particularly high-quality animal protein, becomes non-negotiable. Without enough of it, sarcopenia sets in, the slow erosion of muscle tissue. It doesn't announce itself. There's no pain, no obvious alarm. Just a gradual weakening. You start using your hands to rise from chairs. You lose your balance more easily. Your skin bruises. Your energy dips. And if you fall, your body lacks the strength to protect itself. And it's not just muscle. Protein is required for hormone production, brain chemistry, immune function, and wound healing. Low-protein diets in older adults have been linked to longer hospital stays, higher risk of infections, and poorer surgical outcomes. The irony is, many seniors think they're getting enough. But a slice of toast and fruit at breakfast, a salad with a few beans for lunch, and a small piece of meat for dinner often falls short, especially if they're skipping meals or avoiding meat altogether due to old health myths. Harold didn't need bodybuilding shakes or massive steaks. What he needed was consistency: eggs in the morning, cottage cheese in the afternoon, real servings of chicken or fish at dinner. After his fall, a rehab nurse introduced him to protein-rich snacks: boiled eggs, sardines, even a scoop of collagen in his tea. Within weeks, he felt more stable on his feet. Not strong, not yet, but grounded. The quiet horror of under-eating protein isn't about vanity or bulk. It's about dignity. The ability to rise, to lift, to move with confidence. These things aren't stolen all at once. They vanish, little by little, in every skipped serving. And when the body is finally called to act, to catch itself, to heal, it either has what it needs, or it doesn't. Number 5. The bone's quiet request: fermented dairy. Eleanor had always prided herself on being proactive. She read every label, tracked her steps, and cut dairy from her diet the moment she heard it caused inflammation. At 74, she hadn't touched yogurt or cheese in years. Instead, she took a daily calcium supplement and figured that covered the bases. Then came the jar. It slipped from her hand, a small glass jar of jam. It shattered on the tile floor. And when she instinctively bent down to sweep it up, something cracked deep in her back. Not a sharp pain. More like a splitting sound. By evening, she couldn't stand straight. The X-rays confirmed it: compression fracture. Osteoporosis, moderate to severe. "But I take calcium," she whispered to the technician. He didn't respond. He'd heard it too many times before. What no one had told Eleanor, what so many still don't realize, is that calcium on its own doesn't know where to go. Without key cofactors like vitamin D and vitamin K2, much of it floats aimlessly in the bloodstream, sometimes lodging in arteries instead of bones. And one of the richest, most bioavailable sources of these cofactors? Fermented dairy, kefir, yogurt, aged cheeses. These foods, once staples in traditional diets, are quietly disappearing from the plates of older adults, often due to fear or misunderstanding. Yet they offer more than just calcium. Fermented dairy delivers beneficial bacteria that heal the gut, improve digestion, and help absorb minerals. Yogurt made from whole milk contains saturated fats and fat-soluble vitamins that act like keys, unlocking the body's ability to use what it takes in. And then there's vitamin K2, a nutrient barely discussed outside of specialized circles. Found in aged cheeses, full-fat dairy, and certain fermented products, K2 directs calcium into the bones and out of soft tissues. Without it, calcium can harden arteries and joints rather than strengthening the skeleton. Eleanor didn't know any of this until after her fracture. A quiet, older dietitian on her recovery team, who looked like she'd seen the same mistake play out 1,000 times, handed her a small plate one morning. On it, a thick slice of Gouda cheese and a cup of full-fat kefir with cinnamon. Real food, the woman said. Not just pills. Eleanor started slowly. Her digestion, she'd feared, wouldn't tolerate dairy. But the fermentation made it gentle. Soothing even. Over weeks, her posture improved. Her gut settled. Her skin brightened. And when she returned for a bone density scan a year later, there was no more rapid decline. Fermented dairy doesn't just build bones. It protects the inner framework that holds us upright, steady, and safe. When we remove it without replacing its gifts, the loss is silent. Until one day it isn't. And by then, the jar is already on the floor. The fracture already forming. The body already asking for something it quietly lost years ago. Number 6. The vanishing spice, turmeric and anti-inflammatories. When Arthur moved in with his son after a long illness, he packed light. A few clothes, some photographs, and a small wooden box of spices he'd collected over the years. Turmeric, cumin, clove, cinnamon, little jars filled with warm colors and faded labels. But in his son's modern, spotless kitchen, the box was tucked away into a cabinet and slowly forgotten. "I don't cook like that anymore," his son had said. "We're keeping things simple now." And simple it was. Grilled chicken. Steamed vegetables. No salt, no fat, no spice. Just clean, bland food. It was supposed to be better. Easier on the stomach. Healthier for the heart. But within months, Arthur started waking with stiff joints, tight fingers, and a deep ache in his knees that didn't quite go away. At first, they blamed the weather. Then arthritis. But no treatment seemed to help much. What no one realized was that Arthur's body had grown quiet only because he had fed it the right fuel for decades, and now that fuel was gone. Turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, and their kin aren't just flavor agents. They are ancient medicine, woven into the DNA of traditional diets across the world. And for aging bodies, they serve a critical function, keeping inflammation in check, gently and daily, before it becomes disease. Chronic inflammation doesn't shout. It simmers. It eats away at joints, fogs the mind, tightens the gut, and ages the cells from within. And while pharmaceutical solutions offer quick relief, they often come with consequences. Spices, when used regularly, work more subtly. They reinforce the body's own mechanisms. They soothe rather than suppress. Turmeric, especially when paired with black pepper, reduces inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. Ginger supports digestion and eases muscle soreness. Cinnamon stabilizes blood sugar. These are not mere garnishes. They are quiet warriors. Arthur had once known this, even if he didn't put it into words. He had learned to blend turmeric into soups, steep ginger into tea, sprinkle cinnamon on morning oats. These were habits born of instinct and history. But habits, like spices, can vanish when life gets busy or pain grows loud. One afternoon, while alone in the house, he went searching through old boxes. He found the spice chest buried under a stack of winter scarves. The labels were brittle, the lids hard to twist. But the smells were still there, earthy, warm, familiar. That night, he made himself a simple dish: lentils, turmeric, a pinch of cumin, and olive oil. The kitchen filled with a scent he hadn't known he missed. He ate slowly. Something softened in him. Not just the pain, but the distance between who he had been and who he'd become. Within weeks of returning to his spiced routine, the swelling in his hands eased. His digestion improved. He began walking farther. Nothing miraculous, just a slow, steady hum of healing, sparked by a forgotten flavor. When we remove spices in the name of simplification, we often erase the oldest form of medicine our bodies remember. And for people like Arthur, the difference between inflammation and ease can begin with the quiet return of a single, golden pinch. The rain had just started when Walter sat alone at his kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of warm broth. Months had passed since the strange symptoms began. The chest flutters, the fading memory, the way everything just seemed dull. He had followed the rules. He had done what they all said to do. No fat, no dairy, no meat. Cut fruit. Keep it clean. Keep it light. And yet, here he was, exhausted, anxious, unsure of his own reflection. It wasn't until a quiet young nutritionist at a small clinic reviewed his food log that the first thread was pulled. She didn't talk about superfoods or fads. She just asked simple questions. When was the last time you had real butter? Do you ever eat berries? How do you feel about yogurt? What's your protein intake like? Do you cook with spices? Walter hadn't realized until that moment just how much had vanished. Not just foods, but textures, colors, smells. The comfort of warm oil in a pan. The tang of a good cheese. The burst of sweetness in a blueberry. It had all disappeared, one careful decision at a time. Together, they built a quiet return plan. A splash of olive oil over his vegetables. Sardines twice a week, despite his old reluctance. A bowl of kefir with cinnamon and raspberries. Eggs every morning. Pumpkin seeds by the handful. A slow-cooked stew dusted with turmeric and ginger. Small changes, each one harmless on its own. But together, they added up to something powerful. The change was not immediate. But slowly the fog began to lift. His heart no longer skipped like a broken metronome. The tremors in his hand eased. His mind, once brittle and scattered, began to settle, like dust floating back to the earth. And with it came something he hadn't felt in years, appetite. Not just for food, but for living. One morning he opened his fridge and smiled. It looked alive again. No longer a barren shelf of wilted greens and dry chicken. Now there was color, texture, blueberries, spinach, eggs, cheese. The soft glow of golden broth cooling in glass jars. He understood now. The most dangerous losses are the quiet ones. The nutrients that hold the body together, the flavors that speak to the soul, the building blocks that whisper, "You still have strength left." Walter hadn't been sick. He'd been stripped down, slowly, by a culture of fear and a lifetime of mixed messages. But he was building back now. One real food at a time. For those over 60, the danger rarely lies in indulgence. It lies in emptiness. In the hollowing of meals that once carried meaning. In the quiet retreat of the very things that nourish strength, balance, and joy. And the body remembers, even after the flavors fade, even after the muscles weaken, even after the fire goes quiet. It remembers what once sustained it. And if given the chance, it will return. If you've ever lived through something like this, please consider leaving a comment in the comments section. You might be the person whose experience helps another viewer realize they're not alone. A single comment from you could be the reason someone else decides to speak up or become alert about their health. Your support means the world to us. We request you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so that you are notified when our next video is live.